Hey everybody, it's Brandon.
And Zeke.
And we're coming back with another Daily Boils episode. And for this episode, we're going to be talking about our top 3 best moments in movies and TV shows. Just to kind of conclude the end of the year, as 2022 is finally coming to an end. And we wanted to kind of reflect on the best moments that we enjoyed.
Yeah, and there are a lot of memorable moments from this year, from both television and film. And I think it's just a great opportunity for us to kind of evaluate the year by those projects that came out and talk about some of our best moments.
Yeah, most of our properties that we talk about do involve Marvel and Star Wars, but there are a lot of other properties I think that we're going to touch on that do involve just movies in general and a lot of the things that are being produced and also get influenced into the things that we mainly talk about, that being Star Wars and Marvel.
Yeah, and that's a perfect transition for my first top 3 moment of 2022, and that is the Batman chase scene in The Batman. One of the things that I think is most that stands out the most about this scene is that it's difficult to make the Penguin seem like a worthy adversary to the Batman without it being too campy or comic book like, kind of, in the direction of like Tim Burton's Batman Returns Penguin. But this scene made the Penguin feel intimidating and really capable at actually kind of taking on the Batman, at least in a driving scenario. And then it showcased the new Batmobile so well, and just the aggression and power to it.
So beautiful.
Yeah, and and how it complements Robert Pattinson's Batman characterization as something that's very dark and brooding and strong, but also sensitive and needs work. And then I think it gave us that brilliant shot that was in the original trailer for the movie of the Batman approaching the Penguin after the car chase ends and the Penguin's car is flipped. And it's that upside down point of view of the Penguin watching the Batman approach, and it's just it's wonderful, and it really does define that movie in a lot of ways. And that's my number 3 moment of 2022. Brandon, what's yours?
So for my number 3 moment of 2022, it was really hard to kind of organize these, to be honest, but I think for number 3 it would be the ending of Wakanda Forever. That being the introduction, spoiler alert, the reintroduction of T'Challa.
Yeah.
That being little T'Challa being T'Challa Jr. In that scene, we finally have Shuri sitting down and grieving T'Challa as we kind of get this entire arc of her not really going through the process of grieving and rather just going through the process of revenge, and her going through that dream state and seeing Killmonger kind of reinforce that essentially that she's following his footsteps rather than following the footsteps of her older brother. And just that scene when it's really quiet and we get flashbacks of T'Challa basically showed us that Shuri had concluded her arc of not seeking revenge and seeking the pursuit of love and just deciding to cherish her loved ones and the memories of her brother rather than trying to seek revenge. And then just once again the introduction of little T'Challa right there and then was a double whammy right in the heart, because we get the continuation of T'Challa as a Black Panther, and that legacy is continued through a bloodline, which is really cool because there is always so many theories about things going multiversal, as pretty much as kind of seems to be the answer for a lot of things. I thought it was a very wholesome way to continue the T'Challa storyline by continuing it through his son. The whole movie itself was a whole grieving process with the loss of Chadwick Boseman. But that last scene definitely gave us the optimistic look of what he has given us and the stories that we can cherish, what he's done for fans, and what his legacy will continue to do for fans with the continuation through little T'Challa. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's my number 3 moment.
I mean, it very much makes you excited for what's going to come next with Black Panther. My number 2 is Luthen's monologue in Andor episode 10. This scene, it's very short, and it does not impact the totality of the story in terms of the plot. But, I mean, it is absolutely Shakespearean. And, he has a line that I share dreams with ghosts, and I think there's just such a profoundness to that line, and it's really kind of shocking to hear that uttered in a Star Wars show at a certain point. And that whole monologue, it focuses on the dark side, quote unquote, or the extremism of the rebellion, in which Luthen talks about using his the weapons of his enemies to defeat them. and how dehumanizing the rebellion has made him. And that leads into this kind of, I guess, idea about the destruction of like his ego, and an insight into the kind of psychology of what the rebellion ultimately is, and it's being martyrs. It's being people who are willing to die and sacrifice everything that they are and what they have to really end what people may not see as a great injustice, but is truly tyrannical. And it made Andor, to me, a show that is worthy of its Academy nominations at this point, and worthy as kind of this drama that Star Wars previously hasn't been. So it was really cool to see that.
And my number 2 moment of 2022 would have to be the intro of the Batman. Primarily being because that entire intro scene right after the Riddler introduction would be a perfect scene that captures the entire identity of what Batman is.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the Christopher Nolan movies, and that advocated a lot of his detective work, a lot of the technology that Batman has in the comics. And then we have Batman in the Zack Snyder, which I was not a big fan of, but it's more of the brute force of what we see in the superheroes. And I think in this Batman introduction, we finally get like the identity of Batman, as he is just a shadow lurking in between buildings, flying over you, just basically being this entity of fear that is being utilized to clean up Gotham. And he is a detective, and there is a lot of huge detective work that he does throughout this movie that shines brightly, as that's what Batman does. This introduction really captures the fear of what Batman is. So I think that this intro is definitely one to be remembered. This intro also reminded me a lot of the Arkham art style, primarily just the world building that seems so close to what was like in Arkham. The Arkham games were a huge beneficial factor of why I love Batman, and now being able to see a movie in a world where I feel like I visited was really cool. And I love how much similarities it has to the Tim Burton world. Obviously Tim Burton's a little more cartoony, but it's interesting that the closest world that I can relate this to is the Arkham saga. So I think that's another huge beneficial factor of why I love this intro as much. Also the movie in general, because it does feel like the Batman that I know.
I guess that brings us to my number 1 moment of 2022.
Yes, what is that, buddy?
What I chose was Namor sharing his and Telecon's history with Shuri in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. This scene, it's not not high intensity action scene. It's a very calm and just a well constructed conversation between two young rulers, even though Namor is 500 years old. It comes down to the idea of like he isn't this old kind of wise man necessarily. He's truly a warrior king. And so I think one of the most significant things that scene does is that it draws attention, and the amount of detail and research that the production crew and Ryan Coogler and the writers all put into this film in terms of drawing from Mesoamerican culture and history, and basically bringing it into the Marvel universe in a way that I really did not think could be done. It creates sympathy from Namor too, and that's something that's important because Namor is a pretty villainous character, and ultimately he is the villain of this film.
Yeah, definitely.
But once we understand his history, his the struggle of his people and the upbringing that that kind of made him the king that he is now, it really did solidify this idea that Namor is somebody that we want to understand more about, and that when he is integrated into the larger landscape of the MCU, we want him to be a hero. And that kind of leads into this idea that it was incredibly empowering for people of Mesoamerican descent to see their culture and history depicted in a creative and new way. I have not seen a film that does that to this level. I mean, there are films that do depict Mesoamerican culture. Some are good, some are very loaded and subjectively negative towards Mesoamerican cultures. And it just comes down to when you imagine Disney trying to take that on, you don't know exactly what they're going to be able to do, but they really did do a great job of integrating culture and history all together. So Brandon, what is your number one moment of 2022?
My top moment of the year would have to come from Avatar: The Way of Water. Primarily maybe just because I saw this movie most recently. But I'm still in shock and awe on how amazing this movie was. I was not a big fan of the first Avatar movie, and this Avatar sequel blew me out of the water. No pun intended. But yeah, I was very blown away how such a high budget movie could be such a highly impactful emotional story as well. So I very much enjoyed this movie very, very much. And I think the one scene that really grabbed my attention was, spoiler alert, but Jake Sully's son, Loak, I believe is his name, becomes friend with this the space whale, a species known as Tolakan, and basically this Tolakan saves Loak and they become friends, and there's this whole scene where it's kind of like this bonding process, and it was beautiful. That scene perfectly exemplified the technology capabilities of what they can do, and also showed a beautiful story of friendship. There are a lot of scenes in this movie that I think also fit in this category very well, but I think this is the one that comes to my mind first. James Cameron did a phenomenal job with this movie, and it's once again remarkable that such a high budget movie can have such good content to it as well. And I think it's going to change the landscape for a lot of other blockbuster movies, just how the first Avatar did as well. And I hope it does. I think Avatar 2 held a new standard for high budget blockbuster movies, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other studios are going to learn from this. I do understand that James Cameron is one of the few directors that have the full liberty to do what they want, that other being Tarantino and Christopher Nolan. So I do understand that this is a very rare specimen of a creation. So that's why I want to mark it up there, and I do hope that the continuation of this saga will be as good as The Way of Water. And yeah, that's my top moment of 2022. So that's going to be our top 3 moments of movies and TV shows of 2022. And there's so many other moments that we've missed, but we definitely wanted to talk about these specifically just because we believe that these are the most iconic and also the most important going into the future. So yeah, that's going to be it for us.
Hope you guys enjoyed. Catch us back here next time for another episode of the Daily Boils. Yep. I'm Zeke.
I'm Brandon. If you beautiful people can go ahead and subscribe and comment down below on your top favorite moments of 2022, that would be fantastic. And yeah, have a happy new year. Catch you real soon.
And have a good night.